Dan, you were up in the highly sophisticated press box at the Stade de France, one of the most modern stadiums in the world. Of course, you immediately knew there was a handball, didn't you?
Yeah, it's funny. It just seems like a different world now, but it was not. I think we were in an area with no screens, certainly the Irish press, and yeah, look, you see a goal go in. It would have been a deadline nightmare, the game even going to extra time at that stage. So you have your head down for most of extra time. You see a goal go in. I always remember Shay Given running away after with his arms in the air, and that's like, okay. But sort of Kevin touched on it there. It was a bit of a communications, but it actually required one of the Sunday journalists, it was Roy Curtis from Sunday World, who wouldn't have been working on the night, effectively dictating over the phone a phone call from home to describe what had happened. And we all almost had to take that on trust that this was a reliable version of events for like the live reports that were filed, because we were right on deadline. And it was really only afterwards, down in the tunnel, I suppose, or down in the main press room downstairs, that we all saw it, from my recall. Obviously now something would happen if you miss it. You'll be able to catch it on social media within 30 seconds.
Thierry Handball, he almost caught her and brought it back into play and put it across. So, of course, your reaction would be, yeah, you do feel cheated. Obviously devastated with not going to South Africa.
And it was all very fraught afterwards. I remember we were down trying to speak to Raymond Domenech afterwards. The French Federation didn't send a translator to the press conference. So there was one Irish fella there who spoke French trying to get questions in, and there was this sort of dismissal of it, which actually you're sort of meant to leave your feelings at the door with this stuff, but it actually did get pretty fraught because of how the locals handled it afterwards. It was like out of sight, out of mind. It didn't happen almost.
Kevin, how quickly was there an actual backlash then, and where was the backlash coming from?
So I think outside the stadium, in the pubs down around the Moulin Rouge that night, there was this weird sense among the fans that we were cheated.
We're very proud of Ireland, but there was a cheat. Henry the cheat. And fair play to Trapattoni and the lads. They've done the country proud. You're our heroes.
But it's a strange thing to explain. Like I have very few newspaper front pages that I keep. There's like maybe the election of a Taoiseach, covering a trip to the White House, going to Gaza. So like that's the category we're talking in.
And Offaly winning in All-Ireland, rare things.
Hasn't happened in my working career, sadly, Fionn. Thanks for bringing that up nonetheless. But among those very small 5 or 6 front pages at home that I still have, that at some point when I have a house big enough will get framed in the bathroom, is the front page of the following day's Evening Herald, which was, the headline was just, "You cheat," and you have a picture of John O'Shea roaring at Thierry Henry. And it's weird because that was one of the best nights of my life. It was so much fun because there is something in this thing where you've won, you should have won, and someone's taking that away from you, and that righteous indignation where you're, on one hand you're really angry, and on the other hand you're going, God, we beat the French and they're so bad they had to cheat to take it off us, just to give you a sense of how big a deal this was at the time. And I don't think you get this in the same way anymore. So I was in the Herald, and all the tabloids would obviously have given it acres of coverage, but the Irish Independent the following day, so this is on the Friday, on the news pages, so Dan would have been doing his thing in the sports pages, but the front page was a wipeout. So basically there was no other news that day except this story, and the first 6 inside pages of the Irish Independent had nothing except this story. Now, I can't think of anything in more recent times, bar maybe the wars in Ukraine and things like that, that would have taken up that sort of page 1 to page 7 coverage in the Irish Independent. An election will barely even do that.
Dan, protests about matters like this go through official channels then. So how were the FAI handling it?
Yeah, so what I remember very clearly is the following day, our flight home, there was a massive flight delay. So we actually, most of the media spent the day in a sort of an airport terminal, a quite small one, and everyone was just going around on the phone, really trying to figure out what was going on. It became clear pretty early days that the FAI were planning to launch some kind of appeal to this. My timeline on it is a little bit foggy because there was various little strands to that across a couple of days, and it all happened relatively quickly. I definitely remember a precedent of some game involving Uzbekistan and Bahrain at one point being produced like a key piece of evidence in a murder trial or something, like that this 2005 game that had been refixed off the back of some tactical refereeing error. This could be it. So the FAI were saying that there might have been some comments from players, but privately you probably would have spoken to people around and associated with players who knew deep down that this really wouldn't amount to anything. They made an appeal to the French Football Federation, and I think it was 2 or 3 days later, I remember a back page or sort of a story from the French Football Federation saying definitively, no, we wouldn't be consenting to a replay.
Kevin, did we have the world behind us in terms of this grave injustice?
We definitely did. I think I remember the first time I realised that it was going to be such a big story was the morning after, the night before, and I was in my hotel room in Paris. And I go back to the start of this and remind you that my job was to be among the fans, to be embedded among the fans. So I was very tired the next morning, and my phone rings, and I was assuming it was the news desk in Dublin, so I didn't even look, picked it up. Hello. And they're like, "G'day, ABC Australia here." That's a terrible accent, but you get the idea. Any chance you'd come on our drive time programme to discuss the Thierry Henry incident last night? And I'm like, yeah, sure, when? They're like, great, we'll put you on now, and straight through. And I literally had to start the interview by going, we're very disappointed, but you can tell from my voice that we had a good night anyway, living up to the Irish stereotype. But from there, it was in every newspaper from America to Australia. It was, like, to give you a sense of it, all the headlines were kind of, Le Figaro had France qualify without glory, Le Monde, the big French paper, the French relieved, the Irish disgusted. And that was the tone all over the world. Die Welt in Germany, France go through Scandalgate to the World Cup, and on, French hand Irish World Cup exits Sydney Morning Herald. So it really was that the global coverage of it was very much sympathetic to the Irish, and it very much focused actually on France being cheats.
It raises a lot of problems. First of all, I believe, of course, it's embarrassing. I support France, and it's embarrassing to qualify the way we qualified.
The result wasn't fair. Unfortunately, you cannot change that, but the result wasn't fair, no doubt.
It really was kind of this flair that this was French arrogance, that this was the French. And then it went very quickly. Dan says the timeline about how it played out. It went political almost before it got into kind of sport of arbitration. And Brian Cowan goes to Sarkozy to ask him for his view on it. And Sarkozy comes back with a prompt, well, I'm very sorry for the Irish for what happened, but no chance that we're going to replay it. And that was the day after the match.
But that's it. Our economy is going down the tubes as well, you'd have to point out. So that's the political priorities. Dan, what about the Monsieur Le Cheat himself, Thierry Henry, who we will never forgive for this slight upon our nation? What was his reaction?
I was actually in with the managers, but so other people would have spoken to the players. But I mean, Henry, I think there was that iconic image, I suppose, of Henry on the pitch with Richard Dunn, sitting down, consoling him.